folks, Free Play Frank. Okay, this week I've got part one of my food shredder build video, where I build a machine to shred the food that I feed my animals. And then later I'm going to play another Blue Oyster Cult song for you, After Dark. Okay, let's get to work. Alright, we're going to be building a shredding machine to shred the food for feeding the goats. Now let's go over the materials list. So we have a 1/4 horsepower electric motor, a 30-to-1 90-degree speed reducer, 2 sets of Lovejoy couplings, and this little adapter here. This adapts onto here, and then that will allow this to adapt the other one of this onto the motor shaft. And now the other coupler, this little ring I made in here, you see this little ring here, this is only about 40 thou thick. I had to make that on the lathe, but that's to fit this onto this shaft here, because this device here is metric, and I have no idea where to get a metric one of these. You can probably get it, but and this one here is gonna transfer from this shaft to the shredding portion of the machine. Now we have 2 gears here. These are Ford timing gears out of a 6-cylinder engine. Now there's an issue here with the gears. I wanted 2 gears the same size, but unfortunately I've been looking for probably a better part of a month, and short of spending days and days in junkyards taking apart big trucks and transmissions and stuff like that, there's just no chance I'm going to find 2 gears exactly the same, and I'm not set up to manufacture them myself. So how this machine's going to work is we're going to have 2 rotating shafts that rotate. One goes this way and the other one goes this way, and there's going to be teeth on it. Here's this here is a cardboard template of the teeth, so they're going to rotate this way, and then the other shaft's going to have teeth on it that are going to rotate this way, and that's going to tear the food up. And this shaft here, this is a hexagonal shaft out of stainless steel that I bought from my local scrapyard. I'm going to cut this in half. Well, not quite in half. It has to be 1 inch longer to accommodate the input drive shaft. And then these are going to be cut out in the center here to fit on this hexagonal shaft. And then this piece here, this is 1/2 inch thick by 1 1/4 stainless. I'm going to cut off small pieces of this, and they're going to be welded onto the end of the teeth here, so that it can chop the pieces up into about 1 or 1 1/2 inch chunks, because that seems to be about the best to feed the goats. Because the problem is, like, you put a whole apple or a whole potato in the feed trough and the goats can't get their mouth around it, so you got to chop it down. Also, the little goats won't be able to eat anything, so you got to chop the food down into mouth-sized pieces for them. And then we've also got this bicycle sprocket and chain, and this is how I'm going to correct the issue with having the 2 different size gears, and I'll show you that when we get that far. And we've got 2 pieces of 1/4 inch flat bar in stainless steel that I bought from my local scrapyard. Okay, what I'm trying to decide here is, since I need to make this shaft into 2 shafts, so I'm trying to decide where to cut it, because all the pieces have to fit on so that everything lines up. So I figured out that I'm going to cut it right in the middle of this square here, because everything on this side of that line is for this shaft, and all these pieces here will be fitted onto this section of shaft. So you have the input drive right here, and then you have these steady bearings, and you can see the hole in the input drive is 1 inch, and the hole through the steady bearing is 1 3/16. So I'm going to have to machine down the end of the shaft so that they fit onto these 2. This is going to be 1 3/16 here, and then the end's going to be machined down to 1 inch. That'll remove the hex and then it'll just be round underneath that. And this little spacer here I made, this fits over the hex shaft so that I can turn it in a steady bearing, because I can't get this hex shaft through the center spindle on my lathe. And at this end we have the other bearing, and then we have these timing gears here. So this timing gear is going to be mounted onto this shaft, and it's going to drive this timing gear. That's why it's offset. And then I'm going to use these bicycle sprockets to step the speed back up so that both shafts are turning at the same RPM. Because as I explained earlier, I'm having a really heck of a time finding usable gears that are the same size. And then at this end, this is another little bushing that I made here, and I'm going to machine the shaft down so that this slits onto here, and then this bicycle sprocket here presses onto that shaft. And I'm going to cut keyways in these shafts too, and you've already seen me do that. I showed you the milling attachment for the lathe. So we're going to cut this shaft off right in the middle of where this square is here. Okay, I cut the shaft. Now this should give you a better perspective of how this is going to work. We're going to have the input motor is going to drive this shaft through these two bearings here, and then it's going to turn this gear, which is going to turn this gear, which is going to be on this idler, and then it's going to have this. I made these spacers here to fit onto that idler, and then this sprocket fits onto these. That's going to be on here like this, and then that's going to turn this spacer here that I made, that's going to have this smaller sprocket mounted on this shaft. And the capacity of the machine from here to here is going to be 12.5 inches. Well, here's a frame that for mounting the cutter shafts on, and the bearings are going to be mounted on here like this. One on this side, one on the other side. Same over here. Shafts will run across like this, with the cutters turning. And I'm going to clamp these onto this piece of steel here to hold them straight when I start tacking this together. And then the legs are going to be made out of these legs from this old office chair. I got the cushions I use them for kneeling on. I'm going to make it wide enough so I can get one of these pans underneath. So chop the food and it'll fall into one of those pans that I feed the goats with. Got the stand all welded up. You can see food tray fits under there real nice. Now we're going to mount the motor and the speed reducer. So I got the coupler installed, and I've got it blocked up so that the speed reducer is level with the shaft of the motor. And this piece here I made is the bolts are going to bolt through those 4 holes. And that's not quite high enough, so I'm going to add a couple pieces of this 1/4 inch flat bar underneath it. And I might have to shim it with a thin washers or something, because I want to get it so that these two shafts here line up as perfectly as I can. And then I have this plate that I made here. Those 4 holes are for the motor, and that perch is going to be welded to the front here, and then this is going to be attached to the frame of the machine. Here's how I cut an internal keyways. You just use the boring bar, and then you get a piece of tool stock that's the same as your key, and you just move it in and out like this with the carriage. And then you advance this 1/1000, a little bit more than 1/1000, about 2 thou, but it'll still work. See? It takes a long time. Sometimes when you gotta go through it 2 or 3 times to clean it all out. And if you take one thou at a time, then it does work, and it doesn't deflect too bad. It doesn't have too much deflection in the tool bit. But that's pretty much the only way you can cut an internal keyway without a broach set. Alright, we're cutting the keyways on the shafts with the drilling attachment on the lathe. It seems to be working out quite well. When the machine's stainless, it's so hard you have to take light cuts. It takes a while. Well, I've got all the machining done now, the shafts and all these pieces here. Got all these things machined, bored out, all the keyways cut, keyways made. And this little piece here, I had to make this insert here. And the shaft it goes on has two different size slots. There's different in this piece and different in this, so I had to custom make a key for it. This piece I had to make a sleeve because it's way too big. Cut the keyway in it, pressed it into here, and keyway in there. And then these things, remember the template, got 20 of these, and I got these cut on a water or laser jet machine, which turned out to be way too expensive, so I don't think I'm going to go that route again, but they sure as heck did a nice job. And this channel is about teaching you what you can do when you don't have any money, not what you can do when you've got unlimited cash flow. So if I want to start doing stuff like this, I'm going to have to set up a Patreon page so you guys can help me pay for it all. But anyways, the next step is we're going to lay these pieces out all along here and get the spacing right, and then figure out how long we have to cut the little spacers to fit them all together properly. Well, I cut 50 of these pieces of stainless to fit between the jaws, and I did it on the bandsaw here. I put a stop, and I used a squirt bottle with water to keep it lubed, and it worked fine. And here's my setup to weld these pieces together. I got one of the shafts in the vise. This is the sleeve I use to hold the shaft in the steady rest, so that these sit level on the shaft so they're square. And I've got one of these things clamped into each space. All 5 spaces have one of these little spacer blocks and clamped together with C-clamps. And I'm going to have to use a stick welder to weld this with stainless steel rod. So we'll see how that turns out.
What's that in the corner? It's too dark to see. What's that noise I'm hearing? Who's that calling me? Long ago and far away I heard your voice. Once I heard you sing your song, I had no choice. Terror took control and showed me what to say. Let me loose, I fear, finally found a way. After dark I see you. After dark I feel you. After dark I want you. After dark I need you. Waves, there is no question. Death's shadow is undone. We only need each other. in shelter from the sun. Long ago and far away I heard your voice. Once I heard you sing your song, I had no choice. Terror took control, it told me what to say. Let me loose, I fear I finally found a way. After dark, I want you. After dark, I need you. After dark, I feel you. After dark, I see you. There is no turning back now. Our fate is traced in blood. Tasted true salvation. Your power is my drug. Long ago and far away I heard your voice. Once I heard you sing your song, I had no choice. Terror took control, it told me what to say. Let me loose, I fear I finally found a way. After dark, I want you. After dark, I need you. After dark, I feel you. After dark, I see you. After dark, I touch you. After dark, I do. After dark, after dark, after dark. All right, there you have it, some Blue Oyster Cult. That was After Dark. That was off their 1981 album, Fire of Unknown Origin. And incidentally, that song is about vampires, and we all know vampires don't exist. But they're fun to sing about, and I hope you guys had fun this week. I sure did. See you next time. Take her easy.